Historians of Reddit, what is the strangest chain of events you have studied? We learned about this at school. In the 1950s in Borneo they were suffering from an outbreak of malaria. So, with the help of the World Health Organization, they sprayed DDT all over the island to kill the mosquitoes. But the DDT also killed the island's wasps, which helped control the population of thatch-eating caterpillars that the people's homes were made of, and thanks to this, their roofs began to collapse. Many other small insects started to get infected by the DDT, which were eaten by geckos. The geckos developed a tolerance to the DDT, but the cats who ate the geckos didn't, and the cat population started to die off. This led to the island's rat population to increase greatly. And that's the story of how an island with a malaria problem led to cats being airdropped into Borneo. Cats being airdropped into Borneo. I'm picturing gray and orange tabby cats floating down with their parachutes into the jungle now. Whereas I picture two guys at the open rear of an aircraft just picking up and tossing cats out. Jungu Canal. So, the Han heard the Chin were fond of mega projects and massive infrastructure investments. So they found a hydraulics engineer and sent him over to sell them on an absurd canal idea. Build a massive canal to use runoff water from two flood-prone rivers to irrigate worthless plains. Tame the river's flooding. Irrigate wasteland. Everybody wins. And in the Han schemes, it's an absurdly large project that will keep the Chin diverted and invested for decades. And it does. Except about halfway through, the Chin cotton onto this and confront their hydraulics engineer, Jungo, presumably confronted with whatever creative thing they do to spies and saboteurs. Throws himself on Chin mercy. Yeah, I'm a spy. Yeah, it was to sabotage your efforts, but I'm really an engineer, guys. And this will really work. Honest. Let me finish it. And please don't do that thing with the cheese grater. The Chin, presumably, conclude they can always torture him to death later, and let him remain in charge of the project. And wonder of wonders, it works. Thousands of hectares of rich but fallow desert are turned into fertile farmland. Existing farmland is made safer by giving the flooding rivers runoff channels. The canal makes the Chin rich beyond their already immense wealth, which they turn to larger armies, eventually crushing the Han and, briefly, uniting China. What happened to the engineer? Nobody cares about engineers once they've made things work. Source: am engineer. A Chinese man wanted to create a potion to become immortal. Instead he accidentally created gunpowder and made fireworks. And he made rockets. Pretty much the fall of the Berlin Wall. The USSR was already crumbling by this point, and so they agreed to allow the wall to be opened for a bit. Well, the guy in charge over in Berlin didn't really get the point across to the public very well. And as a result, everyone assumed that the wall was permanently coming down. This led to pretty much all of East Berlin flocking to the wall and demanding to be let through. The guards there knew there was no way to restrain all these people without a massacre occurring. And the Russian government had no real way of easily fixing the huge mistake. And so the Berlin Wall fell. All because of a misinterpretation. One of my earliest memories watching it being pulled apart and people celebrating in random. David Hasselhoff. Is this why David Hasselhoff is loved by all Germans? President Andrew Jackson was walking out of the Capitol building with his buddy Congressman Davy Crockett. A man approached them, drew a gun, but it misfired. The man drew a second gun, which also misfired. Andrew Jackson, fairly old at this point, lifted his cane and began beating the would-be assassin. Normally, people would react with justice served, but Jackson was beating him so badly that Davy Crockett had to pull Jackson off his would-be assassin, who was arrested shortly after. The would-be assassin stood trial, represented by lawyer Francis Scott Key, author of The Star-Spangled Banner. and was the first American to be found not guilty by reason of insanity. Edit. Crockett was in the House, not the Senate. This reads like some shitty American-themed UWU fanfiction. The 50th season of Designated Survivor. The events that led and culminated in the War of the Bucket for sure. Essentially, one Italian state who followed Holy Roman Emperor stole a bucket from another Italian state who followed the Pope. War broke out. The Papal state highly outnumbered the HRE state, but HRE state won. Then stole another bucket. Was a trip for sure when I learned about this one. The bucket is on display in a museum in one of the cities involved. Not a citizen here. I saw the bucket. Suck it baloney. Also, not a museum, but the city's Gothic bell tower. Horses evolved in North America, spread during prehistorical times into Asia, and then later went extinct in North America. If things had been only slightly different, horses could have been native only to the Americas, or just completely extinct by prehistory. Not having horses would have made a huge difference to Asian and European history. No Mongol invasions, no European knights. They would have had to learn to ride pigs instead. That would have been amazing. Asterisk battle bears. In 1918, British MP Noel Pemberton Billing caused a major scandal when he accused actress Maud Allan and Margot Asquith, wife of the previous Prime Minister, of being at the center of a homosexual ring sabotaging the war effort. Evidence included Allan having performed in a play by Oscar Wilde, and Asquith having attended the performance. He presented his case in an article entitled The Cult of the Clitoris, in which he claimed the exiled Prince of Albania had a black book listing all the blackmailed homosexuals in Britain. Maud Allan, who was in fact homosexual, Asquith was not, sued for libel, but lost during the trial. One witness claimed to have seen the Albanian prince's black book, and claimed that the judge's name was in it. That ending is basically a big no you. That's so good WTF. Probably how Pepsi briefly became the 6th largest military in the world. In 1959, President Eisenhower wanted to show the Soviet Union how great America was. So the government set up an American National Exhibition, and sent Vice President Nixon there. Well, Nixon and Soviet leader Khrushchev got in an argument over communism versus capitalism. It got heated. The president of Pepsi stepped in and was like, "Bro, Khrushchev, chill out. Have a Pepsi." Khrushchev must have loved that shit, because then the Soviet Union wanted to permanently bring Pepsi over to their country. The problem is that their money wasn't accepted throughout the world. Instead, like true Russians, the Soviet Union traded vodka for Pepsi. This was all good until the late 1980s, when their contract was going to expire and vodka wouldn't cut it for payment. So instead they traded Pepsi, a fuck ton of submarines and warships, for $3 billion worth of Pepsi. Sadly, instead of terrorizing the seas and shooting harpoons at their enemies, Pepsi decided to sell the fleet to a Swedish scrap metal company. Damn. Pepsi could have gone full East India Company if they had wanted to. They may have defeated their arch-rival, Coke, once and for all. As a boxing historian, probably the story of an ancient Greek boxer named Cleomedes. Apparently, while in the Olympic final, he killed his opponent by stabbing his fingers into his opponent's chest. Killing him is your, which means he loses due to a strange and awesome rule was if your opponent was killed by the fight, he automatically won. So despite surviving the fight, Cleomedes is judged the loser. No glory or olive wreath, returns home to Astypalaia and lapses into deep depression. Commits the first mass murder of school children after punching a support beam so hard the school fell down. All the kids die. Angry mob forms to kill Cleomedes, who takes shelter in a giant chest in the Temple of Athena. Townsfolk storm the temple and try to pry open the chest, end up having to rip it apart board by board. But when they got it open, there was nothing in it. Naturally, the people didn't know what to make of it. So they send people to the Oracle of Delphi, who declared that Cleomenes was the last true Astypalion and that he'd be worshipped as a demigod. That is how an Olympic boxer became a deity of fertility after murdering a ton of kids. Royal family ain't got shit on ancient Greek crazy. Edit. Spelling Greek is difficult drunk. Also, this seems like a good time to plug my article 1 posted yesterday. https imager.com/gallery/4vqprx9. The deification of Antinous is another strange story. He was the Emperor Hadrian's boyfriend and super cute. So when he died young, Hadrian declared him a god. The weird thing is that this caught on and the cult of Antinous continued long after Hadrian died. In fact, right up until the Roman Empire became officially Christian and shut down that pagan shit. So there were all these people worshipping Antinous and building temples to him for 2.5 centuries, fully aware that he was a god just because A. he was good at sucking dick and B. Hadrian said so. That must have been some legendary head.
Subscribe for more hot Reddit takes in your inbox, guaranteed.